Takeshi's heart raced as he approached Yuki, the most beautiful girl in his class. His palms were sweaty, and he could feel his cheeks burning with a mix of anticipation and fear. "I was wondering if you'd like to go out with me." For a brief moment, Takeshi dared to hope, but then her expression changed. A look of disgust crossed her face, followed by a burst of laughter that echoed through the hallway. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly before him, each step feeling like an eternity. "Yuki-chan?" he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Takeshi felt his world crumbling around him as whispers and giggles filled the air. Time stood still as Yuki's eyes widened in surprise. "You go out with me?" Yuki's voice dripped with disdain. "Have you looked in a mirror lately, Takeshi-kun?" The hallway seemed to close in on him, the laughter growing louder with each passing second. The laughter spread like wildfire. Students who had been minding their own business now turned to watch the spectacle. "Did you hear that?" Fatty Takeshi asked out Yuki. What was he thinking? He sat alone in a corner of the cafeteria, trying to make himself as small as possible. An impossible task for someone of his size. "Oh, Yuki-chan," one of them said, loud enough for Takeshi to hear. "You should be flattered. Even the losers dream big." He looked up to see Kenji, one of the popular boys, approaching with a group of friends. "Listen, I've got some advice for you. Before you ask out the hottest girl in school, maybe try losing a few £100 first. We heard about your little confession. Bold move, man." Takeshi felt tears welling up in his eyes, but he blinked them back furiously. He wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of them, as if she'd ever go for someone like him. Takeshi's face burned with shame. He wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor and never be seen again. But there was nowhere to hide. Yuki's friends had gathered around her, their faces a mix of amusement and pity. His round face, his oversized uniform straining against his bulk. He saw himself through their eyes, and his heart sank even further. He cried until his eyes were red and swollen, until his throat was raw from the sobs that racked his body. He would lose weight, become someone worthy of Yuki's attention. He would show them all. For the rest of his junior year, he would be known as the fat boy who dared to dream too big. He looked at himself in the mirror, really looked, and felt a wave of self-loathing wash over him. It was almost worse than the mockery. As he approached the gates, he could already feel the stares, hear the whispers. His size made him stand out, a target for ridicule and pity. A group of girls giggled as he passed, and he caught fragments of their conversation. There are plenty of other girls out there. Takeshi became a punchline, a cautionary tale. "Don't pull it, Takeshi," became shorthand for any social misstep. Even the teacher seemed to avoid calling on him, as if his humiliation was contagious. Another wave of laughter washed over him. Takeshi felt his legs grow weak, but he forced himself to stand tall. High school wouldn't last forever, he told himself. One day, he'd leave this all behind. By the time the final bell rang, it seemed like the entire school knew. On one hand, it meant escape from the daily torment of school. On the other, he feared losing what little social connection he had left. It colored every interaction, every moment of his junior year. He watched as Yuki laughed with her friends, her smile radiant. For a moment, their eyes met across the room. Takeshi thought he saw a flicker of something, regret, pity, in her gaze. But then she turned away, and the moment passed. The other campers were just as determined, their eyes burning with the same desperate desire to reinvent themselves. The camp counselors taught them how to dress, how to style their hair, even how to walk with confidence. Takeshi absorbed it all like a sponge, practicing his new persona in front of the mirror each night. By the time summer drew to a close, he barely recognized himself. As the weeks passed, Takeshi felt his body changing, muscles emerging where there had only been softness before. The pretty girls who had never given him the time of day now giggled and blushed when he looked their way. It was intoxicating, this newfound power. Takeshi reveled in it, basking in the admiration and curiosity that followed him everywhere. He'd wanted to be noticed, but now he felt more invisible than ever. "Whatever happened to that fat kid, Takeshi?" one of them asked. "I haven't seen him around this year." Another girl shrugged. "Maybe he transferred schools." "Good riddance," I say. "He was such a loser." "No way. You can't be serious." But as they looked closer, recognition dawned in their eyes. Gasps of disbelief echoed around the table. Was this really what he'd worked so hard for? His old bullies approached him sheepishly, offering awkward apologies. His former friends gathered around, eager to reconnect. "I'm right here," he said, his voice shaking slightly. In the past, she'd barely acknowledged his existence. It was because she'd used his name, recognizing him for who he truly was. He'd wanted to transform himself to be accepted, but in the end, it was embracing his true self that had brought him real happiness. The summer camp had given him the tools to change his appearance, but it was up to him to change his life. As he looked towards the future, Takeshi knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he had the strength and confidence to face them head-on. He had found himself, and that was the greatest transformation of all. "I'd love to," he replied, grinning from ear to ear. Now she smiled warmly at him. "Hey, Takeshi," she said. "I was wondering if you'd like to grab a coffee sometime." He used his experience to help other students who struggled with self-esteem, sharing the lessons he'd learned about self-acceptance and the importance of inner beauty. The girls stared at him in confusion. "It's me, Takeshi, the fat kid you're talking about." His mother burst into tears while his father clapped him on the back with pride. He'd achieved what he set out to do. But he realized now that true happiness came from being accepted for who he was, not just how he looked. He began to open up, sharing stories of his summer at camp and the hard work it took to change. Takeshi felt a mixture of excitement and terror. He'd spent hours choosing the perfect outfit, making sure every hair was in place. He maintained his fitness routine and stylish appearance, but he also let his goofy, kind-hearted personality shine through. He joined clubs he'd always been too shy to try before, discovering hidden talents and passions. The pretty girls who had initially been drawn to his appearance now sought him out for his wit and charm. To his surprise, people seemed to like him even more for it. "Who's the new guy? Is he a transfer student?" Takeshi felt a thrill of satisfaction. They didn't recognize him at all. Taking a deep breath, he stepped into the crowded hallway. Takeshi allowed himself a small smile. Phase 1 of his transformation was complete. Now came the real test. Facing his classmates. Even when people weren't actively mocking him, he could see it in their eyes. The memory of his rejection, the judgment of his audacity. He sat alone, picking at his food without appetite. Across the room, he could see Yuki surrounded by her friends, laughing and chatting. He would show them all that there was more to him than his size, more to life than the approval of others. He'd always been the chubby kid, the one everyone teased mercilessly. But this summer, everything was going to change. He'd heard about a special camp that promised to transform even the most hopeless cases into stunning heartthrobs. His old friends avoided him, thinking he was some cool new kid they couldn't possibly approach. The popular crowd welcomed him with open arms, but their conversations felt shallow and meaningless. With trembling hands, he packed his bags and set off, determined to leave his old self behind. She looked so carefree, so beautiful. The gulf between them had never seemed wider. It had shaped him, for better or worse, and would continue to do so long after the echoes of mockery had faded away. He had learned harsh lessons about hope, about rejection, about the cruelty of his peers. But as the summer stretched before him, a tiny spark of determination flickered in his heart. Trying to win Yuki over with his big brain since his body's a lost cause. But he could feel her gaze on him occasionally, a mix of disgust and something that might have been guilt. It didn't matter. The damage was done. He could feel eyes on him as he walked through the corridors, hear the whispers and snickers that followed in his wake. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him break down. I'm sorry for bothering you, he managed to say, his voice trembling. Please forget I said anything. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Yuki's face, heard her laughter, felt the crushing weight of rejection and humiliation. As he turned to leave, Takeshi caught sight of his reflection in a nearby window. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Takeshi moved from class to class like a ghost, barely registering the lessons or the continued whispers and stares. Of course, Yuki would never go for someone like him. "Hey, Takeshi," a voice called out. Takeshi's heart sank. He knew what was coming. Kenji leaned in, a mock-serious expression on his face. The group erupted in laughter. "Thanks for the tip," he muttered, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. Even his few friends seemed uncomfortable around him. They offered awkward words of consolation, but Takeshi could see the pity in their eyes. "Don't worry about it, Takeshi," Hiroshi, his closest friend, said as they walked home. But even as he made this vow, a part of him knew it wouldn't matter. The damage was done. The next morning, Takeshi dragged himself to school, dreading what awaited him. "Can't believe he actually thought, ... double quotes, so gross, ... should stick to his own league." Takeshi hunched his shoulders, trying to make himself smaller, less noticeable. But it was impossible. In class, he kept his head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone, especially Yuki. During group activities, Takeshi found himself isolated. No one wanted to partner with the class laughingstock. Lunchtime was the worst. The cafeteria buzzed with conversation, and Takeshi knew much of it was about him. As the weeks passed, the initial shock of the incident faded, but its effects lingered. He threw himself into his studies, hoping that academic success might salvage some of his dignity. But even his improved grades became fodder for mockery. "Look at Fatty go," he overheard one classmate say. The comment stung, but Takeshi had grown numb to the pain. He focused on his books, on his future. But the weight of his humiliation, like the weight of his body, was a constant presence. As the school year drew to a close, Takeshi found himself both dreading and longing for the summer break. On the last day of classes, as students exchanged contact information and made plans for the break, Takeshi sat alone, invisible. As he walked home that day, Takeshi reflected on the year that had changed everything. Next year would be different, he promised himself. He would return stronger, if not in body, then in spirit. But even as he made this silent vow, Takeshi knew that the memory of his junior year, of that moment of rejection and the laughter that followed, would stay with him forever. Takeshi stared at his reflection in the mirror, his round face flushed with embarrassment. The camp was brutal. Every day, Takeshi pushed himself to his limits, sweating through grueling workouts and forcing down bland, healthy meals. But it wasn't just his physique that was evolving. The day he returned home, Takeshi's parents gasped in shock as he walked through the school gates on the first day of the new term. His old tormentors walked right past him without a second glance. One day, in the cafeteria, he overheard a group of girls gossiping. Something snapped inside Takeshi. Without thinking, he marched over to their table. For a moment, there was stunned silence. Then, one of the girls burst out laughing. Words spread like wildfire. Soon, the entire school was buzzing with the news of Takeshi's incredible transformation. Takeshi felt a weight lift from his shoulders. As the weeks went by, Takeshi found a balance between his old self and his new image. His confidence grew, not from his looks, but from the genuine connections he was forming. One day, as he was leaving school, Takeshi ran into Yuki, the girl he'd had a crush on for years. Takeshi's heart soared, but not just because the prettiest girl in school was asking him out. As they walked off together, Takeshi reflected on his journey. From that day forward, Takeshi became known not just as the guy who had an amazing glow, but as someone who is kind, funny, and genuine. His transformation had been more than skin deep. It had taught him the value of hard work, the power of self-belief, and the true meaning of friendship. The rejected fat boy was gone, but in his place stood a young man who had found something far more valuable than popularity or good looks.